So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are back for a brand new space. The space initially was supposed to limit itself to Liman, following the thread that we started um, yesterday. But now we will get out from a completely different scope, which is we are going to do some hypotheticals as to the news of a meeting between the monkey in chief and um, the orange monkey from the other side. The space will be sprinkled also with some geostrategic hints, especially after the deal that Pashinyan signed to completely finish off um, modern Armenia, because let's be honest, that's what he just did by actually giving way to every aspiration that Azerbaijan had. We can decry the role that Russia played into this one, which was literally stalling the inevitable instead of trying to find a way to bounce both sides towards their corner. There will be a effective loss of an air base and multiple bases in smaller bases, actually, so outposts in Armenia. But beyond that, it was long overdue due to the context. So basically, Georgia being the way it is, and the very difficult aspect of reaching uh, the Armenian Russian deployment, given effectively to the issue with Georgia. And also the fact that if Azerbaijan doesn't want to let them through, they will not be able to fly through. This leads to, as I said, the second step, which probably is going to arrive sooner than later, which is stopping the SMO for the moment and then turning the attention to the bigger issue, which is the potential, because that's what is being floated right now, that Armenia will leave CSTO along with Azerbaijan and they will join NATO. This, of course, would be almost impossible uh, to accept from the Russian point of view, given that it gives NATO access to the Caspian. This is exactly what Russia doesn't want, because right now it allows the Russians to be completely unimpeded when bombing Ukraine or attacking Europe. So I do not think the Azeris understand the problem they are opening for themselves, especially now the bullshit talk about having this bridge over the Caspian, or land bridge over the Caspian, which I repeat, on top of being absolutely madness, will cement the risk for both China and Russia and Iran, of course, to a bypass of all three players. And despite the fact that it's easily quenchable as a threat, I mean, especially the bridge between Kazakhstan and uh, Azerbaijan, it still is a very bad signal for the future of the region. Um, And some signals already started. The Russians already bombed one micro refinery in the west of Ukraine that was half held by Sokar, which is the Azerbaijani state uh, oil and gas company. They bombed another base in Odessa. In this case, I think it was only a fuel farm. They also bombed in Odessa a gas pressuring station, which would help pump out gas from Azerbaijan. Now there are complaints that Russia somehow is polluting Azerbaijani oil that arrives to Romania. In any case, we see an encroachment between Russia and Azerbaijan, and of course, militarily the battle is completely lopsided, especially as I said, because Azerbaijan's um, apple in the eye is literally Baku and the surroundings. And it's a very small territory with a very bad positioning for the Azerbaijanis themselves, because it is top-down descending slope from the Russian-owned Caucasus until the Caspian Sea. On top of the fact that you have the Caspian Sea controlled by Russia and Iran, Yada yada yada. Uh, if it comes to a kinetic action, Azerbaijan is fucked, despite the Israeli technology, despite the Turkish yapping. In a certain sense, Azerbaijan would be a reverse Armenia for Turkey, in the sense that they completely unlocked uh, Karabakh with Azerbaijan, and whatever Russia would threaten, nothing would happen. On the other side, in order to get to Azerbaijan, you still have to go through Nakhchivan. And if Pashinyan gets deposed or Pashinyan changes his mind, because that's what this guy is, it's just a flip-flopper and an absolute traitor. But I mean, this is the Armenian chose. We should not let the Armenians off the hook on this one. They had a chance to depose him once after he was part of the war in Karabakh. This guy opened his mouth and yapped as shit. Of course, this was only a pretext for Aliyev. Let's not turn this upside down. But still, when you know that the other guys have creamed you in 2016 on a very limited flare up, and the Russians run to there, say, guys, just don't start this bullshit. For the obvious reason that they saw the Armenians that weren't ready for this. That's it. That's your game. You had finally a pawn within Armenia. That pawn did a wonderful job, allowed to a provocation to stick. Then instead of giving up power after he miserably failed and tried to have a national unity government in Armenia, well, did what he did, which is insisting on something that was absolutely impossible, and now he's left with nothing, despite the claims that somehow the Azeris are going to allow the Armenian population to go back to their former positions in Karabakh. I don't believe it for a single moment. These guys literally started destroying cathedrals. They have been busy erasing Armenian culture and pretending it was Albanian, not our Albanians, by the way, a completely different tribe with the same name. I mean, for fuck's sake, guys, this is the most Stockholm syndrome bullshit, and it can only be understood by the fact that Pashinyan, from the get-go, is a traitor. If it's not a traitor, then I'm sorry, then the Armenians are to blame. And whatever the deal is with Pashinyan, when you see what's going on and what's going to happen to the Armenian state, it's going to be a huge Turkic enclave territory. There is nothing there. Their only hope is to go outside through Georgia, but we know already that Georgia, despite its current shift in position uh, towards some kind of truce slash good neighborhood re- relationship with Russia, is still a rather Western linked place. And there, at least Russia did the job, which is uh, create a huge problem in territorial claims with Abkhazia and South. So literally, it means that Georgia, as it stands, cannot join NATO. Therefore, still has a major role to play as a buffer, especially when it comes to Azerbaijan. But in any case, this was just an introduction to start situating why Monkey might want to, at some point in the future, stop the SMO at his face, take as much as he can, and then start putting some order in his fucking closer neighborhood, because there is nothing more volatile for Russia than the Caucasus. Not because these guys are super warriors. I mean, this war proved that uh, these people fight a lot better when they can be bandits, and I'm sorry for that. Everybody who needs to hear that, when they can fight for themselves in a typical bandit fashion. When it comes to actually having to do this shit as mercenaries, this is why Ottomans would go to the Balkans instead to the Caucasus. Um, it's just because these guys were hard bargainers and they would just look after themselves. While Balkanics, for some fucking stupid reason, would go to lengths, unimaginable to please their Ottoman overlords at some point, to the point that we would be a completely separate corps and be used as stormtroopers, which caused problems afterwards. But Turks, right? So once you start seeing it like this, you might understand why there might be a window of opportunity for both Trump and Monkey to actually do something about the war. The issue, though, and this you guys know it, is the cocaine addict. Zhidolensky will never accept whatever is thrown at him right now, not because he will get a better chance in the future. As it stands, once you look at the evolution of the war and you look at what's going on right now in most of Donbass, the Ukrainian military is crumpling but not yielding. And the engine is still running, but the chassis is starting to give up. The problem is that they can still drive 50, 60, 70 kilometers, which is quite a while. The main issue that the Russians have right now is that they can feel that there is something there. They can feel that there are cracks. They can feel that they can break them. They just don't break right now. And then it's when sometimes you can lose focus. And this is why I said that maybe some of the operations, some of the axes that right now seem to be stalling or being halted, like Sumy, that might be included in a future deal, start to make sense, although I'm going to repeat, they do not make sense. If I'm the Ukrainians, if the Russians go deep enough in Sumy, it's just worse for them because lengthy supply lines. It's the same thing they did in Kursk. They failed in Kursk. The Russians gonna just fail the same in Sumy if there is not a proper push for them. On top of it, the topography in the area is shit, unless you go for Shostka, but that's a different part of the deal, and we'll speak about that in another space. But so, once you start looking at this, and once you start trying to link it up with what's going on regionally, then you might understand that, okay, Trump and Putin might have a window of opportunity, but the problem will always be Zelensky. And there are reasons for that. So let's go, first of all, and try to guesstimate what might be offered from what's transpiring. Well, before everyone else, let's say it like this, and people from the group can voucher. I aired the possibility that as a first step, the Russians would ask the Ukrainians for a temporary ceasefire in order to go to the next step. 10 to 14 days, I said 10, of ceasefire, that Ukrainians would leave Pokrovsk and they would leave Konstantinovka. This would then allow the Russians, of course, to invest the areas, but to also cease fire for those 10 days, meeting with fucking Trump. Then teams from both sides, Ukraine and Russia, get together. No bombing from those 10 days, no fighting. Within those 10 days, you will only have rotations instead of actually reinforcements, stuff like that. Of course, very complicated to enforce on both sides. And then after those 10 days, 14 days, whatever, you would have a first draft of a plan. And those, oh, by the way, for the Pokrovsk-Konstantinovka, the Russians would leave Sumy for sure. Because that's what the areas are equal to. So you have about 80 square kilometers in Konstantinovka, and you have about 120 in Pokrovsk-Mirnograd. And that means that Ukrainians go to Dobropila, and they go to Drushkovka, and all in between is a buffer zone, not to be crossed, not to be attacked, what the fuck ever. The issue with this plan is that this was the first discussion so I heard, between Russia and the US. The Americans said, you know what, let's do this and then let's push forward, give you the Donbass if you yield on something else. And that something else, apparently, I have no other source on that. I have no other thought on this except what is being circulated by everyone. But so far, it has been completely inconsequential and even contradictory, because we hear from the Wall Street Journal that the guys who have been briefed on Zaporozhye and Kherson, they do not know what to make of it, if Russia is going to keep some of the territories or completely pull out. This, of course, is bullshit, as I said, because Zaporozhye and Kherson cannot be left alone, given they are the lifeline for Crimea, and leaving those areas is literally killing of Crimea. After what happened in 2022 and 2021, actually, when the Ukrainians tried to make this show horse in Donetsk with their Turkish shit drones, at some point, Monkey flipped because he saw what was coming. A gradual armament of Ukraine, and given the position that the Russians had in both oblasts and in Crimea, the humiliation of having the Ukrainians enter back into Crimea would have been too big. If you have left them, if Monkey had left them enough time. Now, we are 3 years plus after the fateful decision in February to attack, and the Ukrainian military position is the worst it has ever been. Not on the battlefield. On the battlefield, they only have yielded about 11,000 square kilometers since the failure in Kharkov. Failure, of course, for Russia. So what they gained in Kharkov, they lost over about 2.5 years after. But what they lost are prime positions, are a slow creeping defeat that's going to the Ukrainians. So there, we're going to speak about Liman after this part. So there, the Ukrainians are looking at exactly what they saw in 2024, which is Russians slowly creeping towards their own objectives, which are obvious since September 2022, when Monkey announced the referenda and the results came in, of course, with 100% or whatever bullshit acceptance of the Russian Union, and therefore those oblasts were legally Russian as far as the Russian law is regarded, which, as you know, for a state is all that matters. A state is a single individual, self-empowered entity. Of course, you need to defend that decision. In this case, Russia is defending that decision by literally breaking the shit out of Ukraine. So on that part, there is no defense there. So de facto, Russia is already having Luhansk. They have Crimea, of course. They have most of the useful Kherson for them, because there's the Dnieper in between, beyond Kherson and within Kherson. Sorry, beyond the Dnieper, within the Dnieper. Then they have about 73 to 75%, depending how you count, of Zaporozhye, which is huge, and it allows this huge buffer and the land corridor to Crimea. And then they have now about 76% of Donetsk, and yeah, Lugansk is 100%, or 99 point something. Therefore, it makes no sense for Russia whatsoever to walk back on either Zaporozhye or Kherson. Kherson, for what's useful for Russia right now, is owned. There is nothing there to be done with it. Ukrainians have tried to disembark, to have some kind of amphibious operation multiple times. They tried to attack on Krinky, Kozachlopan, Kozachlopan is up in Kharkov, but whatever it was, Lager, sorry. Then they did recently attacking Tenderovska Spit. They've tried even further. They've had landing in Crimea as well, very funny ones, with a guy getting captured, another guy getting shot at least. Generally speaking, Ukrainians know that an amphibious operation within Crimea or Kherson right now is fucked. They know it. It doesn't matter what they're going to try, especially as we see the Russians systematically hitting them now with guided bombs. Before it was mostly Shaheeds, cruise missiles, and Iskanders. Now it's literally guided bombs. So they're close enough, or they fire those bombs far enough not to put anything in danger. Now, the other issue when it comes to the outlook from Zelensky's viewpoint is that whatever you're going to accept that would put the Russians in control of at least 70% of oblast boundaries is a huge tactical and strategic problem. I already posted some of these. Like the first thing that you need to check is the first map I'm telling you. It's extremely important because this one is what the Ukrainians are scared of. And so, first of all, are two maps that would actually show the distances from the official oblast limits, official oblast boundaries within the Ukrainian constitution and Soviet era constitution, because there were very little changes after the independence. And you can see where the trouble is for Ukraine. So first of all, I just posted the images. You can check that your biggest problem is that once you give the whole of Donbass, you put the only way in and out of Donetsk towards Dnipropetrovsk in grave danger. There is a small hook of the Donbass Oblast, the Donetsk Oblast in this case, which is 25 to 28 kilometers from the main road going east-west. And then on the other side, if you give all of Zaporozhye, you have the other problem, which is you give a huge stretch of land to Russia to control the eastern bank of the Dnieper. And you put the boundary there and give them a huge salient of about 35 kilometers of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast between the bulge from Zaporozhye towards Vilnyansk and the small bulge coming from the Dnipropetrovsk Donetsk boundary. So it looks like we're going to add the second picture so you guys can understand. It looks like this. As you can see, the danger for Ukraine just losing the Donetsk Oblast as it stands like now is that you are putting a whole lot of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast in the bag. And funnily enough, the salient that's created immediately when you lose, when you give away Zaporozhye, is almost the same size as what remains of the Zaporozhye Oblast on the other side of the Dnieper. So basically, the side that I do think the Ukrainians are not going to agree to give to the Russians, be that for Kherson or Zapo. At the same time, they're going to have to forget about the small slither of Nikolaev that is on the Tendrovska Spit. So basically, just to make a comparison, always using cope state, you can see that the areas that could be exchanged, so Zaporozhye Oblast beyond the Dnieper and the small salient in between Dnipropetrovsk lodged within Zaporozhye and Donetsk Oblast. It's about 1,050 to 1,080 square kilometers. So this, in a certain sense, solves your Zaporozhye situation. For the Russians, when it comes purely to the mathematical point, the issue, as I said, is that tactically, but also strategically, for Ukraine, giving away both Zaporozhye within the eastern bank of the Dnieper, so within Russian reach, we're not speaking about the slither that's beyond, doesn't create less problems than giving them Kherson beyond the Dnieper. Actually, in a certain sense, if I was to be devil's advocate, I would rather have the Russians self-trapped beyond the Dnieper instead of having them holding me for over 4,000 square kilometers by the balls, and then from there on starting to push towards Pavlograd. Because once the Russians are going to reach Pavlograd, they are also going to move on with operations south to north from Donetsk Oblast towards Kharkov Oblast, and then they can also attack from the north. So what's going on by losing Donetsk Oblast and giving away on the Ukrainian side, giving away the oblast limits, is literally enabling the Russians to finally do what they couldn't do in February and March 2022 within, once again, the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. So there is no way, despite what Zelensky said about territorial integrity, that bullshit, it's this the real reason why the Ukrainians do not want to do it. And there are also logistical issues. Logistical issues are very complicated, a very complicated matter when it comes to core analysis, because you're gonna see, okay, these guys went until there, so how they displace themselves over there? But it's very simple. Given that you got ongoing war, you can have an incremental growth of troops and movements, stuff like that. But now, suddenly, you have a whole grouping that needs to get the fuck out of a large part of the Donetsk Oblast, which, if we have to calculate based on cope state, we would be at, just a quick calculus, guys, so I'm not making any stupid mistake. Pop. So you are looking at 6,500 square kilometers. Just, it's a bit approximate. My logic is a bit approximative, but according to deep state, you're gonna be at around 6,466, but 6.5k square kilometers. Leaving this area would be, in my opinion, somewhere between 80 and 120,000 Ukrainian soldiers. Now, this is the only point I'll give to the doomers. It is a catastrophe to leave these guys just go back, even if at some point it was going to happen. They were going to get pushed beyond. the Donetsk and Lugansk um, limits. Now, the problem with this is that you need to understand that unless the point is for Monkey to renege his word and go local on Kharkov, about 900 square kilometers on the Oski line are on Kharkov Oblast. So there, the Russians would need to pull out as well for them to be able to actually ask the Ukrainians to get the fuck out of Zaporozhye. So in the exchange of land, the land swap that we're speaking about, the Ukrainians would lose a lot more. They would gain something. It would be the Kherson moment. So it literally would be their Kherson moment when they would have to save a whole grouping plus another 30 to 40,000 guys in Kharkov that would advance for not too far, but still, they wouldn't get killed. And they would also solve the situation for Volchansk and in Sumy. But once again, those are literally exactly what we're seeing, which are tokens. And then you got the couple of square kilometers that the Russians are occupying within Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Those, in my opinion, are the most important part of this war after the rejection of this deal from Zelensky. I already said I do not think that the Russians are going to push too far in Dnipropetrovsk because for them it would be a token. They're going to push further into Dnipropetrovsk if something happens. So basically the Ukrainians go back to their shenanigans like happened with the attacks on the fleet in the Black Sea, the submarine, then the attacks on the refineries and oil infrastructure. And then finally, this is the most important part, the attacks that happened on the Russian strategic bomber field. Every time Russians try to have negotiations, of course they are bombing Ukraine because Ukraine is fighting back. But then the Ukrainians go and do something stupid because they think it's cheeky and it's brave and it's smart to do it. They have their 1, 2, 3 weeks of PR lap dance, and then suddenly reality gains back in. They get given back a mountain of corpses. They start losing a very large piece of land because the reality is that you don't win war by making this stupid operation. And then they are back to begging for weapons, and we are back to hearing from everybody that we need to stop the war because this and that. And then we have Trump proposing nonsense like he proposed actually an ultimatum that he yapped at Russia between May and July. Now, once all this is said and done, as I said, for the Ukrainians, there is a huge advantage, which is to stop the war even for 10 to 14 days in the version I've heard. Now we're speaking about a nondescript, indefinite ceasefire if the Ukrainians are going to fulfill the conditions above mentioned. In this case, we're clearly speaking about a gradual retreat from the whole of the Donbass, which, as I said, once again, in order for this retreat to happen, the Ukrainians would have to stage a retreat by units. And if we have to be honest, you're going to see, as I said, bunches of 5, 6, 800 people, units with a lot of pickups, trucks, equipments that will start clogging the roads moving out. You know what I'm thinking. Everybody knows what I'm thinking. And that's going to happen. Some rogue Iskander operators, some rogue VKS pilots, some rogue drone operators, some rogue Iranian auxiliary, some rogue North Korean uh, colonel is just going to launch whatever they have. So you will have, in my opinion, between 3 to 5,000 killed while pulling out in big groups of people. And that would be done to stop the deal. Not a false flag, literally letting these guys move, having them on the open, and being able to wipe out 2-3 brigades at once. Best deal ever. Why wouldn't you do them? They are already trying to get out. These guys will need to get back in to defend. It's gonna become a rout. That is what I'm telling you. This is not gonna happen. And if you want a template for that, think about what the Russians did end of March 2022. They were prepared to move out. They spoke to the Ukrainians. They agreed to the deal that everybody says that Ukrainians never were going to agree. Ukrainians played the Russians there, although the Russians also didn't want to stay much longer in Kiev, given how the situation had turned out, especially with the rejection from Lukashenko to allow them to open a wider front on the western flank of Kiev, but that's something else. So yeah, guys, that's your point. The moment the Ukrainians agree and start pulling out in large groups in order to be out of the place for about 3-4 weeks or about a month, you're gonna see these strikes on the rear, because you need to put these people somewhere. If you're gonna try and make a pull out from smallest unit possible, which is a fire team or a small company, a platoon basically, this is gonna take you 2 to 3 months. And in 2 to 3 months, while leaving, there is not going to be peace. Because the whole point of this, I'm going to repeat it, the whole point of this is the optics. Ukraine cannot allow itself to agree to this and then just fucking vacate the places and have the Russians just waltz in. It's not going to work like that. The biggest trouble for Russia right now, as I said, I'm going to repeat, everything else is a W, is a narrow win, big win, whatever you want. But letting the Donetsk grouping, I think, is the biggest concession that Monk is going to do. Because it means that those people who are now, and I started the third on Liman, some of the units are really under-equipped, that are doing crazy shit to still have some firepower, as compared to other idiots who are now counterattacking Sumy, dying there as well, counterattacking in Plavny and Snipogorsk in Zaporozhye, and dying there as well, counterattacking almost everywhere in Pokrovsk or Konstantinovka area and getting absolutely whacked. These guys in Liman are just right now getting punched into the mouth and told to show the other cheek. No lube. And that's the biggest problem I'm telling you guys. The situation that I'm seeing here, by the fact that you'll have to leave the grouping go, is a win. How much a win is it? A big win, a small win, a Pyrrhic victory, a self-nurturing victory due to the fact that you leave the grouping go? I don't really care. A W is a W. You winning the World Cup on penalties or winning the World Cup 10-0, it's just the same. You're just gonna have a fucking medal. And I would rather have a win on penalties, to be honest, rather than have a 10-0 knowing that the other side was no match. I know that for you guys, this war has to be this lopsided affair when the Russians just walk over the Ukrainians, but it's just not like that, given it became a proxy war from day one. It was already a proxy war before, but once it went to the active phase, it had all the hallmarks of a proxy war. The speed which the West organized the Ukrainian defense and sanctuarized their comms, sanctuarized their decision-making process, started to pour weapons and allow them to pull back, go forward. That's where you knew it was going to take ages. So the whole we are crashing on right now. Yes, Russia is doing a lot of damage, and we're seeing Russia's literally waltzing in some positions. But beyond the Donetsk Oblast, you will have to make a choice. We spoke about this over a year ago. The choice of going towards Dnipropetrovsk, to me, is the most important because it forces the Ukrainians to do exactly what they're going to do right now if they're not stupid. If Zelensky is not a moron, he will accept this deal and put the pressure internally to Monkey. Because then what are we going to do with Zaporozhye and Kherson? Monkey will say we'll take them. But everybody here knows, and let's not lie to ourselves, that's why I said yesterday, they're not going to be happy faces. Everybody knows that Kherson is a bridge too far, literally, pun intended. The only way to reach Kherson would be to go from Zapo. Therefore, Zapo is the most important part, and about 20% of Zapos, 18% actually, are beyond reach for the Ukrainian forces if the Russians put themselves together. Because there is, once again, the Dnieper in between. Now your problem as a Ukrainian commander is now you're going to have a reverse Kherson on Zapo for sure. Once the Russians have isolated the Donbass, they're going to have, I told you, the salient popping out east of Dnipropetrovsk. They're going to push through there, and we discussed it. This was the Ugledar Wall, which is going to start reducing the area of maneuver for the Ukrainians for any kind of counterattack towards the Crimean land bridge. And slowly, that will push you into another salient of, I think, about 50 kilometers wide between the former reservoir and the Russian positions coming 45 degrees on your left flank if you're Ukrainians, but they're coming from the right. So the issue is that the implication for this peace deal, in a certain sense, give the priority and the initiative politically back to Russia. If the Russians say, oh, you know what, we're going to agree with this deal, let's evacuate Donbass first, discuss about Zaporozhye and Kherson from the lines later, it gives Monkey the whole latitude he needed to actually turn his fucking sights on Zaporozhye and Kherson. This is an absolute beatdown for Zelensky. He cannot accept this. And as I said, on a tactical level, it's completely damaging. On a strategic level, logistically, it's going to be a damnating holdback. And even if the Russians bomb the shit out of them when they go out, what are the Ukrainians going to do? You think that Trump's going to try and have some kind of retaliation on Russia for that? He's not going to risk a all-out war or a nuclear exchange over the Ukrainians getting the shit beat out of them. He already made a very stupid statement when he said that, yeah, I'm trying to guarantee that Putin just don't kill them off in Kursk. Whatever was to be killed in Kursk between the 5th and 12th of March had already happened. All those other guys were going to get picked off by trying to pull out. So they were always going to die. So just imagine how Kursk went out for the Ukrainians. So they had to do counters repeatedly in order to allow for the rest of them to try and get out and have their supply lines completely choked. Now imagine that for 80 to 120,000 people. And it goes, I'm going to repeat to you guys, for over 6,500 square kilometers. But not only that, if you want to see where these guys need to go from, it's mind-blowing. Because in order to leave, you have two roads, literally two roads, and they all go through Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. Or you're going to have to take the back roads to go towards Barvinkovo. Everything else, as it stands right now, is completely reachable by Russian FPVs. Let alone the AI trash, let alone the bombs, let alone the Iskander. So if you want to move out of there without damage, you cannot stop fighting. But if you do that, the only thing you're going to get is going to be an attrition while moving out. And for as long as you are not seizing your fire, it means that whatever concentration you're going to have within 30, 40, 50 kilometers for these guys to start to reorganize and get the fuck out, is going to get Iskandered as well. Because it's not part of the deal. The deal is you stop fighting, you move the fuck back right away. And it's going to take time. Yeah, but that's on you. You shouldn't have lost the war. You should have signed the papers. That's what a route looks like as well. A lot of people here like dooming and pretending shit that they don't want to think through. But the reality is that this is a huge defeat for Ukraine. That they may turn into something less problematic, just like the Russians did with Kherson. But it has the potential to be 10 times Kharkov. If for some reason some retards do not want to play by the rules, or Zelensky wants to play it smart. I'm going to repeat to you guys, the issue of all this is not as much, oh my God, we didn't get Odessa, oh my God, they're going to get only that part. The main issue, I'm going to repeat to you guys, is letting the Donetsk grouping go. Another thing is that by letting them go, you're going to see the real size. And then you might start having real doubts about the deal. If you see that these guys are only 30, 40, 50,000, then yeah, then you can start dooming and complaining that Monkey didn't finish them off. But I think that the reality, the grouping is far bigger. It's just not able to properly defend because the axis of defense right now is over 200 square kilometers. And the liner axis of defense is somewhere between 160 and 180 linear kilometers. So you have small points when the Russians are poking you over these 200 something linear kilometers and those 220 square kilometers. You have small pockets when they pass. You do not have fighting all over the place. It's not World War II. But because you have all these holes on your defensive, we already spoke about this, because you were using this bullshit drone wall, what's so fucking ever. You're getting beat the fuck out because you're starting to miss them more and more. We had multiple Ostenters saying, oh, this is just a DRG. Bro, it's a DRG 5 kilometers behind your back through a line that logically should be yours. That was for Kupiansk. Same for Katerinovka in the Konstantinovka area. Oh yeah, they just had to cross from southwest. Yeah, bitch, there's exactly where the flat is, so that's how they're fucking gonna cross it. But you didn't manage to stop them until they were in the locality. And you didn't kill them all. They have still positions there. Now you have to fight man to man to try and make them leave. But that also means that your control, your real control, as a Ukrainian, is far less than what you fucking pretend on your map. And this is what I want to tell you guys. This is the biggest takeaway from this. we can't complain about Monkey when Monkey does something stupid. So far, what Monkey is trying to do is not stupid. It may be meek, it may be not bold enough, but the plan is to actually accept something and put all the problem on Zelensky. Zelensky needs to accept, but Zelensky will never accept this, and he's being vocal about that. Oh no, the territory of Ukraine needs to be intact. Like, bitch, what the fuck are you even talking about? This kind of delusional takes is exactly why Monkey finally said yes to maybe we can do something with this. In a certain sense, this is exactly Pashinyan still yapping in 2020 after part of his army in Karabakh and the Karabakh army got fucked up. The difference is that nobody was helping Armenia, where Ukraine is going to get an influx of equipment, artillery, ammunition. Because, yeah, the Europeans are not okay with this. Not as much because for some reason they want to weaken Russia. No, it's even worse. It's just hubris. They yap too much. They start this whole, oh, we're going to whip up the growth in Europe by rearming in order to fight a war that we cannot fight for various reasons. And the rearmament bullshit is building a bridge between the Italian mainland and Sicily, Spain cutting on procurement programs and investing more in yada yada bullshit, the French being broke but still having to fund shit to stand to Ukraine. At the same time, they haven't the capacity to deliver to their own allies, be that China, be that Indonesia. By instance, Indonesia is going to have a 1-year delay for their Rafales, at least. The Czechs for their Caesars, they're also going to have at least 1-year delay, at least. So once again, guys, the problem in this war is that the people who are pushing Ukraine to suicide are now completely off their minds, while the people who are pushing it to have a, let's be honest, a respite are being vilified because the guy who's saying this is a moron. If it was Mert saying this, it would be criticized, but it would be a completely different matter than with Trump coming there and saying, oh, I'm going to meet with Putin in Alaska, we're going to present a plan to Zelensky, he's going to sign. Yeah. You see already the reaction. Zelensky saying, no, Europeans are going to start yapping. Trump is going to get turned into ridicule, despite the fact that what he's proposing right now is the most decent deal for Ukraine in order for them to save some fighting power. Because you just need to check the maps. And this is where we go to Liman. If you check the maps, there is a huge acceleration on the area. And it's exactly where it's going from bad to worse. So first of all, you have a Kotel that now is 100% confirmed by our friends at Cope State, whereas a portion of about 7 square kilometers within Serebryanka forest, so I'd say about 400 to 500 people, if they're still there, have only a exit gap between the waterways there of 800 meters. And the Russian position, 991. Let's be more honest. 900 meters to leave that pocket there. So I'm going to post it so you guys have an idea. At the same time, you have a huge gray area that has settled in Verkho-Kamensk has been fully taken. Remember, that was the future of Ukrainian defense by TWK. Just don't forget all the shit that has been said by people like him. Never forget, because those guys tomorrow are going to be fucking cited as analysts and bullshit, while Timor criminal will be forgotten, except from people who followed us. The narrative that's going to be written after this war will probably make you guys want to hang yourselves, because it will be all fake and bullshit. If you want an example, but far worse, think at what was written post the Georgian War, where the first month or so after the war was 60-70% of truth, 30% of bullshit, and after that, the whole fucking deal was changed into Russia prepared invasion for months, and Georgia did nothing wrong. Literally didn't do nothing. And now we have retards like Dead District and Turkas like Barev that come to you and say, oh no, it wasn't like that. Bitch, I literally had friends there taking pictures showing what the Georgians started doing a week prior. So, whatever. I don't mean to interject anything else. But once you start looking at the front, so you have a first pocket in the Serebrenka area. Then, if you saw what happened, in Zarichne there was a push. You can see it. In Zarichne there is a cross from Torskoye. That's the other problem. Because as Fran pointed out, also people from Timor Criminal pointed out, other people from Timor Criminal, the whole issue with the Serebrenka forest going towards Yampil and cutting from Torsk is that the Gordian knot, pun intended, of the resupply for the Serebrenka forest beyond the Donetsk is around Torsk. The whole discussion that we had with so many people about Terni and Polivka, Torsk, all this bullshit. And I said it to you guys. You cut the Zerebets, you completely make the guys flee. And this is what's happening right now. And of course it was easy to tell about it because like a map is a map. You cannot like undo it. You can transform the area, terraform, whatever bullshit you want to fucking call it. But it still stays the same. The point was to actually do something about it. And suddenly, the conditions have gone so bad for the Ukrainians that now they're going to be completely pushed towards a very narrow gap of 1 kilometer. Posting the pictures right now so you can actually understand how bad it is for that portion of the Serebrenka forest. So, yeah, bro, what can I say? So there you go. You have here the Serebrenka forest, the two issues. So first of all, the gap of the second latch that is kind of blocked and choke pointed by the waterway there, and then you got the choke point at the current gap according to Deep State. Let's be said, Deep State said this, but people on the ground said that either there are other no Ukrainians on the pocket or they're gonna be no Ukrainians on the pocket. There is no way to push out except 1-1. And then you got the push by Torsk against the Zerbets, and there you go. You can see the problem that you're gonna have first and foremost is that whole bunch of area there towards the Donetsk is fucked. It's done. And then you got the push towards Zarichne on the Zerebets that also has been recognized by Cope State. So The Liman area is being dismantled, not because it's very important to the Russians right now. It's being dismantled because if the Russians go back to Liman, then it allows them to actually already foresee the only way for the Ukrainians to pull out of Donetsk. So in a certain way, it makes completely sense for the Russians to push there instead of insisting on Pokrovsk if they have this deal on the table for the Ukrainians. Because you're going to have to leave Pokrovsk in another, on a white bag or on a shitty van or as a prisoner of war. It doesn't really matter. Pokrovsk, Konstantinovka, so far, plus the rest of Donbass, you're going to have to evacuate. If you accept the deal, you're going to be alive. If you don't accept the deal, you might be alive, but not in a very good state or shape, or you might just like be frozen meat to be given back to the Ukrainians. It's as you wish. On this aspect, the offensive posture of the Russians and the strategic initiative they hold on the area makes it very simple for them to actually not care that much about Pokrovsk or Konstantinovka on a short term, because the offensive is ongoing and the Ukrainians will be forced to reply to this by pulling forces elsewhere. And pulling forces elsewhere, the only way to do this is either forcing on Liman or Kharkov, or letting go of parts around Chasov Yar, North Chasov Yar, which once again is suicide. Nobody's going to do that because then you completely crumble the defense of Konstantinovka. So the only way you're going to see this is they're going to stop any kind of bullshit in Zaporozhye, and they're going to pull more territorial defense idiots to cover for the gaps that they already have. Meanwhile, they're going to still keep going at Sumy because Kondrativka is so much more important than Pokrovsk. Kondrativka is so much more important than completely collapsing the Donbass front. I mean, this is what I had on the last space. These people have mental issues because they cannot see the war as a complex situation. I mean the political leadership on the Ukrainian part. When it comes to the political mantra, the Ukrainian leadership is very simple. They are maximalists to the fucking core. And the moment they're going to start yielding is that they cannot do anything about it. The moment they were closer to yield in 2022 is when they thought they were going to get fucking raped. And Arakamia said we needed time because we were nowhere near. Fast forward a year and a half after this situation, he comes back and says once again we cannot go to the negotiation tables, we're too weak. A year after they do Kursk, a year after we're here. I let you be the judge. Don't take it from us at Timur Criminal. Just be the judge. Do you think Ukraine is stronger or weaker as it stands right now? The reality is that Ukraine, despite some sprinkling of long-range weaponry, some bullshit plan to invest more, all that shit, is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And their main weakness, I already explained to you guys, is first of all, they cannot stop the attrition. The attrition trajectory on the Ukrainian side was supposed to be lower than the Russian one. That was the bullshit we were sold for ages. But when you check at how they are right now, Ukraine has proven killed or missing over 153,000 people. If you go to Medusa and even give to them motherfucking bullshit estimates, Russia should be at 188,000. It's a difference of 35,000 people. Do I believe on it? I don't care. Let's say that it's true. Who is hit the worst? The smaller nation who has almost the same losses as the bigger nation? Now every doomer in here is gonna come at me and say, "Hey, but they don't need to have an economy." Of course they do need to have an economy. How the fuck do you think they're gonna pay people for the logistical shit? Look at the latest video that are coming for their work. Look at the latest Iskander video. They had civilian contractors go and dig trenches for them and eating a fucking Iskander to the face, eating grants to the face, eating lancets to the face. How do you think this works? You think these people, for some reason, have fully robotized Ukraine and they can all send these people in? For fuck's sake, Zaluzhny said at some point, I need to mobilize 500,000. Bitch, you did and you failed. Now Syrskyi's singing the same tune. We need to mobilize, otherwise we're going to lose. What are you going to do with your mobilization? On top of the problem that you do not have even the smallest items like individual firearms to equip these people with something decent, in order for Ukraine to sustain another 500,000 people, the current budget would need to be doubled. The effort on money alone would be out of the league for the Europeans alone. But on top of it, you will need to find everything to equip these people beyond the individual items. You will have to have tanks, you will have to have AVs, IVs. Literally the only thing that Ukrainians can afford right now, in any kind of quantity that would help them sustain those 500,000 people going to assaults or defense, is shit boxes. Basically transformed SUVs with fucking steel plates. The Rochelles, the Bat UMGs, the Gurzas. We saw how efficient they are. Russians on fucking cut down Zhigulis are going deeper than Ukrainians with up armored Ford 150s. And the main point is exactly what I told you guys. Manpower changes everything. So if the Ukrainians want to do the manpower thing and try to have some kind of reverse bagration, let them do it. Because it's their logistical lines that are going to start breaking down. It's their supply lines that are going to see the same stuff that happened with Kharkov. I'm going to repeat, the problem that Ukrainians did with Kharkov and Kherson is that they took the lowest hanging fruit after a languish preparation, so it's 6 to 7 months. This doesn't exist right now. The preparation right now is on the other side. The shoe is on the other foot. Russians are dropping on your ass daily 200, 250 UMPKs. Let's not talk about the rest. It's going so badly on that aspect that you have UMPKs flying in Odessa, you have UMPKs flying on Kherson, you have fucking UMPKs being used on the front, and then you have grants being used 1,000 kilometers away and 20 kilometers away. Then you get Iskanders and you get all the shitty stuff that's flying towards the Ukrainians. This is why Ukraine, despite trying very hard for 5 fucking months from end of November to end of fucking March, managed to liberate 17 square kilometers on the Pokrovsk salient. They managed to absolutely cream the Russians on the Bakhmut salient within 2 weeks. They cleared out over 100 square kilometers in 2 weeks. It was so bad that doomers said, oh fuck, Bakhmut is gonna fall. I'm asking you to start thinking and see the trend. The trend generally is that on the ground, Ukraine is losing. It will take some time before they accept this new reality. This year, everybody was expecting, summer is not over, so we touch wood, they're gonna try something stupid. But this year, we were expecting some kind of a reaction after what happened from May to July. There's still nothing. The only thing we had is that bullshit they did against the strategic aviation. I remember a lot of people here who were all yapping about the Saransk optical fiber factory. Even that fucking stupid Bulgarian motherfucking asshole who said, oh, it's the only one, even dared to have a discussion over the unique optical fiber manufacturer in Russia. Never mind the fact that the Russians have acquired smaller yarning systems from China, like PGI. But where is the impact on those Saransk attacks? Do you think the Russians are running out of optifiber? No, they're not. Same thing for Toropet. Same thing for the multiple hits that caused the loss of 1 or 2 jet fighters. Is it relenting the Russian bombing runs? No, it's not. Now, there was the talk about tomahawks on Yela Buga, tomahawks everywhere, left and right. And I'm like, yeah, if you want a nuclear strike on everywhere in Europe, let's do it. Strategic weapons are off limits for Ukraine. Because that's the name of the game. That's how the Americans accepted this fucking challenge. Because they thought they were fucking gonna grind the Russians. Right off the bat. Everybody that you fucking listened between 23 and 24 said that. Then you had all the yapping about long war, war regime, war economy. For fuck's sake, those people, and the joke was the coalition of the willing, they're nowhere to be seen right now. Not because they don't want to do it. For the moment, they just cannot do it. It's as simple as that. There's nothing more to be added to this. Those guys, if they could do it, they would have done it because, as I said, unfortunately for Russia, the guys who are fighting it, they are not logical anymore. We are getting to the point where they are putting themselves out of the global market just because they have decided that it's going to be happening like this. It is the most Soviet mental attitude I've seen. At the same time, you have Trump getting Pashinyan and Aliyev that Europe should actually strive for never allowing this. Aliyev just committed a bona fide 21st century ethnical cleansing. It's theoretically, I'm sorry to say, guys, and legally it's part of the genocide handbook. Is Aliyev going to The Hague anytime soon? No. This is what Europe is doing right now. They are not only hypocritical about this bullshit, but they are actually okay with the aftermath of one war, which is literally about territory and vengeance and ethnic cleansing. It's the most Yugoslav shit ever, most Balkanic shit ever, the most atavistic shit ever for the region. And at the same time, it doesn't apply this to Russia and Ukraine because it has decided so. There is no justification to accept one part, and we're not even gonna fucking talk about Israel and Gaza. Just look at Armenia and Azerbaijan. Those two nations went to war, theoretically indirect but actually direct war. Azerbaijan won, ethnically cleansed within 3 years the territories at stake. Now is imposing to Armenia suicide. This would be akin Russia asking Ukraine to give up all the Odessa shoreline and America buy a land plot all over the coast and say, okay, for 99 years, we're going to have a highway there and we're going to make money. We're going to connect Russia to Romania. That's exactly what's happening. This is the beauty of it. The smaller, weaker nation was forced to accept something that in the long term will just annihilate it. On top of it, growing tensions between military and political blocs in the region. If you want to see what Europe pretends doesn't want to happen in Ukraine, but allowing it in the Caucasus, you have it. And that's the beauty of it. For everybody who's trying to defend any kind of freedom to choose for Ukraine, shut the fuck up. And the beauty of it is literally that Pashinyan, he's a Maidan type. Now do the reverse. Let's say that tomorrow Zelensky gets overthrown by some guy who wants to be closer to Russia and allows this. Allows like, okay, you know what? Have Odessa. You're going to see the answer from the EU or the US. But the US right now, what they want is just to have this shit stop because they have their own issues. They're just, because Trump is an idiot, he created a compound effect of being a third for everybody who actually shouldn't be, and making BRICS from a loose coalition of guys who maybe hate or don't hate America, but like want to be on their own, to something that's going to be something real this year come Shanghai, simply because that idiot is fucking putting tariffs on them. Tariffs that are going to be paid by the Americans, by the way, which is the funny part. But also secondary sanctions. And he went for a fucking India. Like the weakest link of the BRICS in reverse. The Indians, who have always kind of been on the fence due to China-Pakistan, due to the help they are giving to Ukraine. India, by the way, which is a great friend and strategic partner of Russia, sells shells to Ukraine so they can kill Russian soldiers. So India had this unpleasant position for Russia, where we were not going to speak about the fact that Indians try to stop the Russians from repatriating their money and try to actually reinvest their money in India, etc., etc., etc. The fact that strong arming Russian traders to actually give them even bigger discounts. But this is normal. It's completely normal. For whoever has done business with Indians, you know they're going to be fucking money pinchers. The issue of the ammunition, though, that was something different. And honestly, everybody said it was getting a bit too far. But now India, who just had a mini air war with Pakistan, is being pushed to make a choice, whereas this choice destroys one of its main export capacity, which is, as I said, precious metals and gems polishing and cutting. Surat is the capital of diamond cutting and polishing. And on top of it, in Surat you get both. You get hard-pressed, quote-unquote, lab-grown diamonds from China, and then the natural ones coming from Russia, Africa, and elsewhere. So by imposing tariffs on that, the whole New York diamond and gold sector with the funny hats is going bust. Price-wise, they're going to start dropping the natural diamonds and going full, which is already what's going on, by the way. Natural diamonds are dying because compressed earth shit from China is 7 to 10% the cost. Polishing them in India doesn't add that much more. So having 50% on 50%, 50% on 15% of the cost of a natural diamond, you understand that it makes no sense to keep going with natural. So basically what Trump is doing is accelerating the end of the natural diamond industry. The beers is on sale, by the way. And then you have all the parts and electronic components that the Indians are manufacturing for re-export for foreign companies. So you go after these guys who are actually helping you get out of the China manufacturing conundrum for some American companies like Apple, for instance. And on top of it, the Indians had this whole idea of a procurement plan for the US. So that goes down. The Indians now are looking at, what should I do? Stop buying oil in Russia, which I can strong arm to giving me good prices and I can resell elsewhere. That's a net loss. Or having a net loss by buying US and Arab oil while being unable to sell that oil because of the cost into the US. And on top of it, giving the US money for weaponry that they're going to restrict the shit out of me. At the same time, Europeans also started the whole bullshit. So, if you want to make BRICS a reality, Trump and the Europeans are doing this perfectly. So, for America, having Putin sit down and take a deal, it also is an extremely good moment just before Trump goes and meets with Xi, Modi, and the gang, which Trump has antagonized by actually making a thing out of, so far, not that much. Trump is going after BRICS to the point that he's calling Spain a BRICS nation. They're like, come on, man, like, what the fuck? But this is Trump for you. This is America at this point for everyone. They are trying to do something to get out of the decaying train they have been. And a lot of people say, yeah, but look at the economy. Yes, half of the fucking economy doesn't exist. It's inflation. It's inflated speculation. There's nothing in there. Those who get cash within the American economy get it from people who have to take loans or have to borrow. So the cash that some of the guys are getting for the job, so basically no debt, the guys who have no debts, have actually the surprise party coming where that cash is going to be worth almost nothing if those people who actually take the loans to pay the cash default. And this already happened in the US. It was bailed literally out by the Chinese and foreign guys and US government, 2008. So on this aspect, I think everybody except Zelensky is happy to have a deal. As I said, for Monkey, it expedites the conquest of Donbass. For Doni, it solves the situation and puts Russia, so he thinks, but actually, trust me, the Russians will never forgive the Americans what they did in Ukraine. They will use them because they will need them at some point, especially given how they need now to face off with the Chinese within their own market. I'm speaking about the Russians industrially. They need the US to drop the sanctions, so to allow a re-regulation of the internal market within Russia, both on the financial aspect, but also starting to have the Chinese relocalize within Russia. Right now, due to the sanctions, it's mission impossible if you don't want to get absolutely crushed by the sanctions. The moment the sanctions are lifted, and then you're going to see, unfortunately for a lot of people, a cynicization of the Russian economy, because Europe is not going to be able to go back there, given to the fact that the Chinese will enter it fully, not what's going on right now when they basically are just selling in Russia. They will enter it fully, developers, and going to take over the Russian industry. And it's a fact of life. The strategic ones, as usual, will be spared, but market is market. You're going to have maybe some Russian industries that are strategic, like Kamaz, when it comes to the military and production rate. They're going to start collaborating with Dongfeng and all that shit. But most importantly is that the Europeans would have lost the Russian market and the ancillary market that goes with it. These are the problems that both sides are trying to fix. Monkey wants to finish the war as soon as possible. That's the reality. You guys might think that it has to be finished on a maximalist position, but that's just not the case. But the way things are going militarily right now, they're a wake-up call for everybody in this war. If the Ukrainians do not accept it, and they want to keep going to the bitter end with this, so be it. I don't give a fuck. Honestly, we all want that Ukraine gets weak to the point when the phase 3 is some kind of Azerbaijan Armenia 2023 option, when there will be no real war. But unfortunately, it's just not gonna work like that due to the Europeans, the fact also that the main strategic goal of the people who are invested in this war on the side of Ukraine, the Ukrainian side, is just to make Russia bleed. However, and this is where things get funnier for Ukraine, they also do not have that time anymore. They just cannot go on like this. And this is why you are seeing all this frenzy over who should do what, because at the end, if the Russians achieve what they want to do, they're supposed to be in Serednye and Shandilove, the road to leave Donbass towards Izium, well, I'm going to post it so you can know, is exactly 22 kilometers away. Which means that if you have followed what happened to our friends in Dobropila, you would know that it's not that pretty. So a major choke point for the Ukrainians to leave the Donbass area from Izium is being created. And once that happens, the deal per se is useless. So on a purely tactical approach, Russians going through Liman and trying to take those positions there, south of the Oskil-Jerebets line, they are meant to accelerate the decision making of both the Ukrainian political leadership, but also the military leadership, by establishing themselves. Check the last map. In Shandilove, Drobishevo, Liman, what happened is that you start cutting the only highway going out of Donetsk Oblast towards Kharkov Oblast that goes through Izium. Anything else will have to go through a different approach, a longish one, but that one also will be under threat. Because right now, the Russians are 20 kilometers from Dushkovka. So they can cut guys going out of Kramatorsk. They are 10 kilometers from Dobropilya. So that too is a problem. And we know that the arching highway that bypasses the current cut-off highway between Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka has also been reached by the AI drones, but also FPVs. So if you want to avoid all this, you have to go through Barvinkovo towards Izium, and that means a huge detour of 90 to 100 kilometers, which also means that you will have. Remember that 64 kilometer column in Kiev? Well, that's gonna be any kind of pullout if it goes within 1 or 2 weeks from Donetsk. And if it doesn't happen like that, so basically not within the timetable established by the deal that Zelensky is not going to take, then you're going to have smaller groups, which means that the Russians are going to be closer and closer and closer and closer, rendering the whole logic of the deal useless. So yeah, guys, that's what it was. Thank you very much for being here for the space. If you have questions, I'm taking them today. If not, well, thank you very much for being here. I hope it wasn't too confusing. But if you want a recap, it's basically both sides, Russia and the US, Ukrainians as well, but they will not say it. Need a respite, need to accelerate at least some goals attained. For the Americans, they need to pacify Russia in a certain sense, try to show them that, whatever happened was business only. And they want the situation to go down to a certain point where it's still controllable for them. And that means even trying to resupply the Ukrainians in order for them to mount yet another stupidity, or at least be able to defend themselves more properly. For the Russians, as I said, some of the signals they're seeing in their near abroad, in their softer belly, like in Caucasus, they would like to also wrap up as soon as possible this phase of the war within Ukraine. Maximalists be damned, and then turn their sights around and deal with a problem that should have dealt with, unfortunately, since 2016, so 9 years ago, but unfortunately it is what it is, because 2016 gave birth to Pashinyan, and Pashinyan created the tragedy for Armenia that Armenia is going to have to pay for at least a while before things change. On the other part, Russia needs also to address internal issues when it comes to its sorting out of the internal market, its finances, and also straightening out the relationship with China, because right now sanctions stop that relationship from being bilateral. Right now, the Russians is true are having trade with the Chinese, but on the long term, the substitution program would need China to make actual offsetting investment within Russia, which will be a signification of the Russian economy. But given the chasm between Europe and Russia for the near future, it's unavoidable. And most important part is that both sides, Russia and the US, want to still allow themselves a bit more leeway strategically, because at the end, having to rely too much on China is also a problem for Russia in the long term. Not that much into some kind of invasion, but simply because you're going to have to be included in a certain ecosystem technologically, which, in my opinion, is going to start becoming more and more impenetrable transit wise. So you're gonna have to be either east or west uh, for a while. And for the Russians, they would like to be that bridge because Russia effectively is this bridge between the two continents. And for America as well, they would like to have a entry point within the BRICS, but also within this Chinese constellation of partners. Because unfortunately, right now, Trump is an idiot, but it doesn't mean that the American presidency is going to be ruled by idiots for long. There are always cycles. We had a down spiraling cycle with the Americans from Reagan because of how the world was going when you have this strategic shift towards Asia, but at some point Asia is going to be too big for the rest of the world as well, so you're going to have a balancing shift. We're speaking about generations here, 5, 10 years. This is normal. This is how balance works. This is how history has always worked. You had a huge moment for Asia, then you had pendulum swing towards Europe, then everything was being decided in the Middle East, then it changed back again with Europe spreading almost everywhere, taking over, and now slowly shrinking with some remnants, of course, in the US. If you don't understand this, if you are like a maximalist, like something should dominate, forget about it. History always going to be like that. And there are also other problems that Europe needs to solve, and that includes Russia, which is basically population, demographics, but also a investment into the future. What kind of future do we want? And stopping the war, that you like it or not, is a plus. It's not a minus. What is a minus is the conditions and etc. etc. But stopping the war in any case is a plus. People not dying is still a plus. If it was only piggers dying, that would be a bit more different. But people stopping killing each other is always a plus. Now, as for Ukraine, it doesn't really matter. They have chosen their path when Zelensky's mandate ended, and nobody dared to say, okay, maybe we should make a national union presidency and Rada. Nobody said that. They said, no, we're going to stick with Zelensky. There you know what Ukraine is all about right now. And that's not cool. That's not a good thing they're about right now. Ukraine is just about shit right now, and that's it. They're just a leech trying to survive after they started to talk shit after 2022. They had some kind of reason. And right now, they are in survival mode, but they went so far into the rhetoric that they cannot allow themselves to actually see things for what they are. And of course, I understand a lot of people are going to say, but yet, if they allow the Russians to get away with that, what's them to stop from grabbing more? Yeah, that's exactly what I said when I said that history is cyclical, and that's it. Tough luck. You got that kind of neighbor. Balkanic's gonna tell you we had a worse neighbor. I mean, we are our worst neighbors anyway, but we had the Ottomans for quite a while, so I don't really care about what you say. If it was good enough for us, it's gonna be good enough for others. And that's life. The big guy is gonna take stuff from the small guy until all the small guys got together, take the big guy down, and then chaos ensues until from the small guys another big guy points out. On that point, Marx was right. Balance and equilibrium is the exception. So, yeah, guys, if you have questions, up to you. If not, thank you very much for listening. I know it's a bit weird so early in the day for a lot of you, but as I promised, for once I wanted to keep my promise true. Up to you guys. Okay, uh, what? Yes, buddy. It's up to you, man. Oh, I don't know what happened. He just disconnected. Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm really sorry, guys. I would like to know what the hell's going on, but once again, I think our friend Galen is doing his usual. So yeah. So Wally, I'm trying to invite you, but for some reason you cannot be allowed to speak. Maybe you should ask again, so I can point you through. Okay. Uh, I hope you guys can still hear me. If not, well, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on again. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that it's a new account, and as usual, our friends from uh, X, Twitter, whatever, are making the impossible for me to keep going with these spaces. But in any case, yeah, we will see how it goes until the 15th. If the 15th we are into this situation where I expect the Russians to be, which is about 150 square kilometers extra, and then having already started to work with Pokrovsk, not with DRGs and stuff like that, but actually with support elements, then I think the deal in 2025 is not going to be achievable. I think that in order for the deal to work is that there is a counterpart. If we see the Russians already reach Dobropila within this week, when I say reach, be 3 to 4 kilometers out of it, but basically cut the whole highway, not only the Rudinske, but also, as I said, Dobropila, that it makes absolutely no sense for the Russians to sit with the current proposition. So the proposal that I said that was hinted by someone in the know to me, which is get the fuck out from Pokrovsk, go to Dobropila. That's the defensive line of the Ukraine, the reply line of the Ukrainians. Get the fuck out of Konstantinov to Drushkovka. Then we start talking. Then gradually you move out from Donetsk. Okay, yeah, go on, ask your question, man.
Tro, I wanted to ask, what about the financial side of this? Will Russians get their money back, $300 billion that was frozen? And what about Zaporizhzhia and Kherson? Sorry, I've joined just now, so I could not uh, listen to that part. What about Zaporizhzhia and Kherson?
Well, I actually spoke about it in the space, and I said that anything else but the freezing of the lines without recognition for Ukraine is suicide. I pointed maps, you can see that there. Uh, it is, I think, the most obvious hurdle for Ukraine to sign this, on top of the fact that leaving Donetsk Oblast is suicide for also the same reason, because Donetsk and Zaporozhye, they clamped down part of the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and then they create a salient of that oblast within the territory held by the Russians. Therefore, you can lose between 1,000 and 4,000 square kilometers, depending on where the Russians want to actually take you out. Uh, As for Kherson, beyond the Dnieper, I do really think that it will be have. I mean, Russians will need to say goodbye to that, not because they're not able to cross whatever, but simply because if they want a negotiated deal, they will have to give something in return. Um, but as it is right now, it's already unacceptable for Ukraine tactically and also strategically because, as I said, this is a prelude to a phase three. There is no way Ukraine is going to accept being filleted like this. On top of it, if you check the map, Donetsk Oblast also is a arrow shoot from Izium. Izium is a huge knot that blocks the transit within Kharkov Oblast. So, in certain sense, accepting anything on that area the way the Russians want it is just putting yourself back to roughly May 2022. And May 2022, that we will like it or not, was a very bad moment for Ukraine, strategically speaking. On top of it, we are 3 years after. I explained it. The attrition on Ukrainian side is huge, proven losses, which means killed, killed or missing, but in this case, literally missing for 3 years. Well, you know what it is in the worst case scenario for the Russians. If you take Medusa by like its numbers estimates, we are at 155 to 188, let's say 190. I don't really like, it's not a big issue. You can see that the gap between both sides is not as big, and on top of it, you have a gap within the recruitment on one side and within the desertion on the other side. Ukrainian troops go at war as much as they can. Russian troops as well. We're not saying this doesn't happen, but the Russians, according to Ukrainians themselves, keep adding, keep piling up troops. This costs money, this costs times, and so forth and so on, but it still allows them to actually make it worse for Ukraine in the long term. So, as I said, if the Ukrainians are clear-minded, they will take the deal and accept a freezing of the lines within Zapo and Kherson instead of trying to have the Russians abandon them, because the whole point of Zapo and Kherson is to guarantee the Crimean land bridge. Crimean land bridge is also one of the core reasons why this war happened as a minimum result of the invasion. And on top of it, Putin completely changed his tune. He said it, now Russia is taking what's hers, and what's hers in this case is nothing else but, if you have to talk about Novorossiya, it will be Novorossiya. But the reality is making Crimea viable and also handicapping Ukraine as a stable and viable political entity for the time being. And that's what they're doing right now. You just lost 60% plus of your Black Sea coast. You lost Crimea, Ochakov, but also Chernomorsk, Yuzhne, Odessa are way too much exposed. And even the underwater or overwater drone warfare that the Ukrainians are doing, the moment that you cut the exposure over the front and you start slowly being pushed towards the Dnieper, especially if you yield Zaporozhye, I told you, I told actually everybody, it makes it impossible for Ukraine to focus on the defensive plan it had initially. You're going to have the Russians completely corner you up to the Dnieper shoulder, and then it's over. You're going to start having to go back to Pavlograd, and then anything that the Russians might try from Kharkov, given that they're going to start latching you down, it's going to become an absolute shit show for you. On top of it, the war has completely evolved from 2022. So for the Ukrainians right now is to avoid, I'm going to actually show a map because it's something that I already posted. There are two waterways on that come from basically Izum and Dnipro. And those two waterways actually create a choke point once you start losing them. The further you're going westwards, the smaller, the narrower that band is, and you have to choose a lane within the waterway. So once the Russians are going to push you towards Barvinkovo, I'm just going to point this one out because I already explained this in 2024 about what the Ukrainians should be doing. So basically, you're going to have this waterway and this waterway. And this is your problem. Okay, I'm going to post it so you guys can see what the issue is here. Sorry guys, I know it's getting a bit small. So underneath the Kharkov Oblast, you have a choke point over Barvinkovo and Novodonetsk. Once that thing is bypassed, you're gonna see that the choke point goes narrower and narrower and starts getting cut by multiple water lanes. The lines you're gonna see on Novodonetsk, Andrivka, and so forth is the border between Kharkov and Donetsk. But the further you go, you are going towards Dnipropetrovsk as well. So once you start narrowing these lanes and you push Ukrainians back on those lanes, you make it more difficult for them to have a comprehensive defensive system. So you are just going to rout them up until a cornerstone of their defense that is going to be between the Petropavlivka and Blizinki. It ends to the Lozova Heights and the Lozova Reservoir. This is something I already explained, and it goes towards Pavlograd. So basically, if you want a different view, it goes something like this. And there we go. Mm.
And what about the money? Will Russians get the money back?
I'm gonna end this reply to that. So basically, when it comes strictly to the strategic point of view, you are getting towards a choke point towards Pavlograd and Lozova, and this is something, and it's undercut by other waterways. So purely on military aspect, Ukrainians do not want to yield anything right now unless it's been taken by the Russians. The more they get pushed back while fighting, the worse it gets for them. But if they get pushed back now, as a bunch of them, they need to start reorganizing. It makes it easier for the Russians to hit them. Because they're going to say, you know what, buffer zone. I mean, the Russians do not need any kind of excuse to hit them anyway, for as long as the ceasefire proposal hasn't been signed. Now, for the money for a part is gone. Some part has been appropriated by the Canadians via. So basically, it's already locked. But 6 to 7 billion are gone. Your biggest issue is getting the money back to the Russians would mean that you are going to shoot down the whole point of why the money was confiscated, which was that you block this money because you are going to hold the Russians accountable for the act of aggression towards Ukraine, and that means that they need to pay reparations. If you release the money back to Russia, it's a huge own goal. Let's be honest. The Russians, with that money, once they're gonna liquidate it, are going to be back in ship shape like they were in 2021. So in my opinion, and this was the idea that was floated for so long also by Russia, is that half of it is going to be a reparation cost for the land that has been taken. And the Ukrainians should be very happy with. If the Russians play hardball and also stick to their guns legally, especially against Euroclear, then they're going to have to recover all of it, which would have to be stopped by a political act. And that's the only thing that's going to happen is if the Belgians enforce a contradictory royal decree signed in 44, but is contradicted by investment protection law and agreement that I have in 89 with the Soviet Union, but they have it also for other people. It's just not for the Soviet Union, it's for everyone. So it would be going down to a legal battle, and theoretically the Russians should win it. If the Belgians still then block it and then allow the Europeans to take the money, then the legal battle is going to turn against the Belgian state, which would most probably be forced to forfeit a lot of assets abroad. So I think that when it goes to the money itself, the Russians are going to make concessions if they can have the land. Giving away 120, 150 billion dollars for getting about 120, 130,000 square kilometers extra. To me, is it a bargain? Not really. Is it a necessary evil to have at least a legal closure? Yeah, that I think it should work. But if both sides stick to their guns, then it's going to be a legal battle that Euroclear is going to lose. And Euroclear's chairman has said that we cannot do that. If we do that, that's basically theft, and the company is going to be liable. You need to understand that Euroclear is just not Russian money. Euroclear is fucking trillions of funds. And if Euroclear is found liable, the only way they're going to be able to pay for is by declaring bankruptcy. And the funds of other nations are going to be put in jeopardy. I'm going to repeat once again, the problem point of view is closing this as soon as possible. If they're going to lose about 100, 120, 150 billion, they don't give a fuck. If it allows them to have that position that they want. If, though, the Ukrainians for some fucking reason will insist that Europeans do not let the money out, then it's just going to get worse for the Europeans, or at least for Euroclear. This means that in long term, Russia's going to have a victory, but the money is going to get blocked for a long while. And Europeans cannot do shit legally because the way how the European Union, or better said the European Commission, communicated this issue to Euroclear and how Euroclear was forced to block. So basically Belgium acted first after the European Commission fully covered it legally to do the asset freeze. So yeah, sometimes a lot of people do not think, and this is what happened both with the Belgian state and the Europeans in 2022. In my opinion, they thought the war would be fast in a way or another. So basically, Russians are going to get to their objectives within 2-3 months, and then they're going to have this discussion about we give you your money back if you pull out of fucking Ukraine. But nobody was expecting the Russians to go this deep, have also that much difficulty, and at the end still get out of it as we are seeing here with a victory. The size of it, the scope of it is something that you can discuss as much as you want. I don't give a fuck. For me, it is a W. But the fact that nobody saw it coming and didn't initiate a legal projection in order to ensure that Euroclear wouldn't get bombed by a legal case against Russia or from Russia against it. This is exactly why I'm saying that nobody was expecting this war to last this long. I think that the Russians changed their tune when it came to a long war after probably what happened in Kherson and Kharkov. But at that moment, the euphoria on the European side, on Western side, stopped them from being clairvoyant and say, okay, but we have a problem here. And it's true that from time to time, the seizure, the money seizure objective popped out. It simply was for nothing, because in order to seize most of the money, they would need to actually undo Europe clear. So yeah, that's my point of view. In my opinion, Russia's going to let part of it go just so there is a kind of legal compensation for Ukraine losing that land. This is also something that the U.S. did to Mexico after beating them and taking over a huge part of the Mexican territory in the 19th century. So on that aspect, there are precedents. So yeah, that was it. Basically, you should forget about Kherson beyond the Dnieper for the moment. Zapo is going to be a point of content, but most probably the Ukrainians will have to let it go. In the midterm, short term, they're going to have to hack about it. And as for Donetsk, this is the whole point. But once you lose Donetsk, you're going to have a snowball effect for Zapo for sure. As for Kherson, you have the Dnieper, so it is a huge problem. That's the answer. I hope you are okay with the answer.
Okay. I get it.
No problem. So if everyone has anything else to ask or to add, you're free to do so. I don't really. I'm in a good mood right now, not because of the deal or whatever, but simply because we are getting to the point where everybody is starting to understand the limitations of their positions, be that the Russians, the Americans, even the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians just don't want to give it up, and that's the big problem. The moment it is going to dawn them that there is no way out is the moment when things are going to accelerate. We would like that moment to be as far as possible in the timetable, so that the Russians are as far as possible within the territories they want to recover, because that would just raise the price for the Ukrainian side. Like we did the joke, put the oblast in the bag and nobody gets hurt. I think Zouav posted that hilarious parody when you got this Indian politician or Pakistani politician, I don't know, when we don't move out for 5, and then he went to 6, 7 to 8. So yeah, the more the Ukrainians do not accept their current posture, the more it's going to cost them to accept it in the future. That was the whole point of the discussions and the tactics employed by the Russians so far when it came to negotiations. But we would like that these tactics are actually go to the point, and this is why I told you guys. I hope that within the 15th of August, Russians are close enough to Dobropila, so that point of the temporary ceasefire just drops. So it's out of Donbass or nothing, because the Russians are already in Dobropila. The axis from Konstantinovka to Slavyansk is a problem, but it is that axis that is most important in order for the Russians to make it extremely difficult for Ukraine to claim this is a victory of any kind of sorts. Because once you are at the gates of Izium, it's back to May 2022, and that's not a pleasant sight for Ukrainians anyway. So guys, if there is nothing more to add, thank you very much for being here. I'm sorry it was also a bit confusing this time, but I hope you got the gist of it. Enjoy your day, enjoy your weekend, and see you later. Bye-bye.